Hello, everyone, and welcome. I am Geysha González, and I'm the Senior Vice President here at the Center for European Policy Analysis, or CEPA. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to today's discussion on Poland's leading role in tech innovation, cybersecurity, and counter-disinformation efforts. I am joined by Secretary of State for Digital Affairs, Janusz Cieszyński, who is here in Washington, D.C., to discuss Poland's tech policy, tech agenda, and everything that has to do with supporting Ukraine, something that is very much front of mind for us here at CEPA. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
So, of course, I want to dive right in to the conversation when it comes to Ukraine. This is something that has been on our minds. We think very much, and it's nobody doubts that Poland is leading the way in the West and in the world in supporting Ukraine and Ukraine's efforts. Poland, CEPA, and allies across the region have been very familiar with the Kremlin's toolkit of influence, disinformation, cyber attacks. And so would love to hear from you what you think is one of the key areas that the West needs to pay attention to that they have not yet really fully wrapped their minds around.
So I think that it is the disinformation machine which has been a part of Kremlin's arsenal ever since, which we should put more focus on. We have the most advanced tech companies in the world in the United States, and I strongly feel that they have not been doing their part in countering disinformation. When we speak to policy teams in these companies, we hear that they took down, for instance, a network of a couple of thousand accounts. So we can see that this is not enough. And we know from everyday life, but also from the analysis that we have been doing in Poland, that the scale of this is a lot larger. And we have seen disinformation waves coming one after another. And we have been trying to monitor these, but also to counter these with our own campaigns. We did one recently with Jigsaw, a company from Google, and also with an NGO from Poland, which specializes in countering disinformation. But this is, of course, just a drop in the ocean, and I think that we should put all the available tech that we have behind this effort.
And, just so that our audience gets to hear, what are the effects that we're seeing on some of the disinformation campaigns? Of course, there are degrees of, where some of the Kremlin's efforts are more effective and places where they're less effective. Why should we be keeping an eye out on this?
Well, first of all, when the war started, within a month, Poland welcomed over 2 million Ukrainian refugees that came to Poland, that fled their country, being afraid of what the Russians are going to do. And this was probably the largest ever flow of refugees that came into Europe for quite some time. And this is always something which is going to be, in the long term, an issue for the host country. And I think that Poles as a society, they did a terrific job on welcoming Ukrainians to their homes. Poland has implemented many measures to make them feel at home. We also use tech for that. For instance, we issued an equivalent of a social security number to all people that came from Ukraine. Also, to enhance security, we have their biometric photo, we have fingerprints. We have that in the database, which can also be used in the future. And we did this, the process started only 3 weeks after the war began. So we deployed this very quickly. And I think what this shows is that we were able to react as the state, as society. But when we look at the long-term consequences, we have to watch out for disinformation, because when we were busy doing everything that was in our power to welcome the Ukrainian citizens into Polish homes, the Russian disinformation machine had already started its works. And from day one, we have been hearing stories, fake stories about how Ukrainians that came to Poland have extra privileges over Polish citizens, how the means that we use to support them are more generous than the ones offered for Polish citizens, things like that, which are meant to polarize and generate conflict between the Poles, the hosts, and their guests, the Ukrainians.
And thank you. That's so interesting. What do you count for the success? Like, how has the government actually been able to counter-message some of these narratives to ensure that there's still, cohesion within the Polish society to continue to support Ukraine?
First of all, the best part about the whole situation is that despite these efforts, the warmth of the reaction of the Polish society was extremely high. And this meant that despite all efforts at trying to divide us, I think from the start it was going to be a very hard job for the Russians. But what we were doing was we were debunking stories that were put into the media, into social media by the Russian networks of influence. And this seems to be the best way to counter disinformation. First of all, to highlight specific topics that are used to disinform, but also to sort of nudge people to turn on their critical thinking when they hear something which might not be true and could be meant to just incite bad feelings towards the Ukrainians. Because this is, I think, the biggest success the Russians could have achieved but have failed to do so. Because I think that the reaction from the West, from the United States, from the United Kingdom, from Poland, from the rest of the European Union, it was brought up also because it came from the bottom. It came from the people who were sympathetic towards the Ukrainians' cause all over the world.
Thank you for that. And, something very interesting that you had mentioned, of course, in your previous role as Deputy Health Minister, you focus on information services. You were just talking about how in part of the integration of the Ukrainian refugees into Poland had to do with, getting biometrics, getting them carded, getting them really registered. That is, when we think about Poland, at least here at SIPA, we think it's the hub of tech innovation, of critical infrastructure in Europe. And I'm wondering, what do we account for that? The fact that Poland could just, get that started.
I think, it was a project where you didn't have to motivate people. The team worked 24/7 because everyone knew that this is critical and we have to do all that is in our power to deliver these solutions. Because it was just after the war started, and from idea to delivery, it was 10 days. People worked over the weekends, they worked nights, but they delivered. And just to put this into perspective, when we, at the height of this process, we would serve 50,000 Ukrainian citizens a day in a process which is similar to getting your Polish national ID, which is on average about 17,000 a day. So it was like with the same resources, the same local governments, because it was local governments that were the ones that executed this. With the same people, they managed to do 4 times the normal workload, because of course they still maintained services for the Polish citizens. So this was a huge effort on all levels. And I'm happy to say that it proved to be a success. And Ukrainian citizens have been using also a mobile ID, so we don't have to issue a plastic card or anything like that. You walk out of the local government office and you have your ID, which you can use to confirm your identity in all of Poland. And this was particularly important because people came to Poland with very different means of identity. And it would not be true to say that even the majority of them had a biometric passport, which is a means of identification that is normally used to say that this is the person who is actually before me, the one that's in the document.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. I think it's so fascinating to see Poland really be able to flex all of its capacity in supporting Ukraine, but also as a leading, tech. I wouldn't say the tech master, but I want to say like a tech giant of sorts that is rising tech giant in the EU, one of the largest digital economies.
That's very nice to hear, but I still don't think we're there yet. but I think this was a project which sort of made us believe that we can actually get there. I think that we have shown to ourselves, which is also important at times, that we can do ambitious projects and that we can deliver digital solutions. And these are things that we managed to do for the Ukrainian citizens that came to Poland, but also we are doing more of these for Polish citizens and just do everything that we can to make their everyday life easier just by offering these services.
So you're saying you're not there yet. So what kind of steps do you think Poland needs to take to get there? And how involved is Poland in trying to shape some of the things that are coming from the EU when it comes to tech regulation? We've seen the Digital Markets Act, Digital Services Act kind of roll out. How would Poland grade these efforts in helping them achieve that? And what other steps can Poland be taking to get there?
I think every month there comes an act with just a pause for August when Brussels is on vacation. I mean, this shows that the digital field is one of the most important ones when it comes to EU regulations. And I think it's not a coincidence. For instance, in the recovery plan after COVID, there were two big parts on which the government had to focus in the EU funds. These were climate change and digital. And so I think this shows that digital is the future, and we need to take everything that we can from the possibilities that arise. Because I think the biggest change that we're in the middle of is to start thinking digital first, mobile first, because for a long time, when you look at a process which you are now doing online, actually it's pretty similar to just filling out the paper form, but it's on the computer. And in reality, a process which is fully digital is one that you design to be digital, because then it turns out that instead of filling out 50 fields, you just fill out 3 of them, click on your mobile app, which has your identity on it, and you're done. And this is the true digital transformation that we want to achieve in Poland. And when it comes to the EU regulations, for instance, there is a regulation on the European digital wallet. And this is a regulation where Poland is one of the leaders of the transformation, and sort of we're trying to push more ambitious goals in that department, because we would like to not only have means of identity, but also a fully transactional app that would actually deliver services to citizens, to have it just like, for a decade now, I think when a business is doing IT, it is 100% digital, and usually it's mobile first. And I think that the EU should go the same way when it comes to providing services for the entire population. So that's just one thing, but also there's a lot of regulation which is sort of meant to try and regulate the digital world, which has developed very rapidly. And DSA, DMA, that's a good example. Also, you have the Cyber Resilience Act, you have the NIS2, which is a cybersecurity act as well. You have many pieces of regulation, and when we're looking at this, I think it's fair to say that we want to, in some places, we think that this regulation is reasonable and goes the right way. For instance, there's this piece of consumer-friendly regulation on a very, very simple thing for the chargers, for the phone chargers and computer chargers. So there's just one type of charger.
Right.
And of course, people say, we had a meeting with American businesses and someone says, so, okay, but you should leave this to the market. That's okay, that's fine. But I mean, if the market means that we're going to pay $10 for something which costs 30 cents to produce, and there's a monopoly which prevents competition entering that market, that's not good. And that's when regulation enters, and I think it changes the world for the better. But also, we see ideas that regulation should mean that European-based companies should not need to compete as on par with the companies that come from other parts of the world. And I don't think that's good, because if you over-regulate in these areas, it might end in a way which is not optimum for the consumer, for the business. Of course, I mean, we are fully aware of the fact that tech giants, they come to Europe. We don't feel they're paying their fair share of taxes. We're not feeling that they are particularly good citizens on some issues. But it's not, I don't think that saying, okay, so let's just develop alternatives from scratch in Europe is the best option for this.
And thank you for bringing that up. I mean, I think that when it comes to private and public partnerships, would love to hear, you mentioned earlier a partnership with Jigsaw where you could actually, track some of the disinfo narratives and see how it was trying to transmit around society. I wonder if there are other examples either of some partnerships with tech that have been positive and that you think there need to be more of, or are there areas that you think that would be immensely valuable to have private-public partnership but has not yet gotten there?
Yes, so I think cybersecurity is a field where we have very good experience in cooperation with the private businesses. We have a program of cooperation in cybersecurity, which is meant for private companies to join forces with the Polish government and provide us intelligence, but also goes both ways. So we also give information that we have and we feel might be valuable to these companies to them. So it goes both ways, and it's, I think, a cooperative effort that works very well. Poland is hosting now 2 big data centers from which are part of the cloud infrastructure from Google and Microsoft, and I'm 99% sure that AWS is also building something, or announced that is building something in Poland, which is also a good thing, because we feel that customers and businesses, they want their data to be close to them, despite the fact that the cloud is a promise of, having your data very secure somewhere in the cloud. I think people and businesses, they want it, and the European regulators also want it, to have these piece of information within the European Union, and the best option would be for it to be in the country itself. So these projects, I think they're going very well. And I think the part where we could have more cooperation is what we started from, which is disinformation. And while I understand that the companies are reluctant to give government access to their policies, I think these policies, first of all, should be more transparent, should be more up to date when it comes to current events. First, it was COVID, and we know that social media was a place where a lot of fake news about COVID was spread, and this has definitely led to a lower number of people that were vaccinated, a lower number of people that took protective measures against the pandemic. But now we see the same thing with the war, and of course, we hear the companies say, so we're working with NGOs, we're working with some initiatives from the civic society to tackle this problem, but I don't think that it's actually working. I don't think that we have organizations which are capable of being a really strong, competent partner at this point in these areas. And also, in a very simple thing, not having enough Polish, Ukrainian speakers that man the help desks of these companies. That's also an issue that I think should be, we should have more cooperation on that from their side. And also, I think that while I understand that handing over any personal data is not an option, I think that there should be more openness to providing stats like trends, because we have our ways of observing what's going on these platforms. But for instance, you have closed groups in which you have tens of thousands of members, and you see these waves of disinformation going through them, and we have no means of accessing them. And while I wouldn't want access to see who wrote what, it would be very helpful to know that there is a rising number of groups that, for instance, say that, I don't know, a popular theme was Ukrainians having a better access to healthcare in Poland, better than Polish citizens. So that was something we had to counter very quickly, because healthcare is one of the most sensitive public services that you can have.
Right. When you, thank you for that. Thank you for laying that out. When you have had conversations with some of the platforms, which I'm sure you have, when you bring this up, what is usually their response? Is it what is usually the response that you get?
Unfortunately, usually it is nothing very meaningful that comes out of these conversations. I mean, we hear that, of course, they understand the problem, they are aware of the fact, but then when we ask about things that could really be done and particular measures that could be taken, we don't see a lot of progress. And this is, of course, generalizing. With some of the companies, we see a more proactive approach. And I have to say, if I was to name what is the reason behind why some companies are more active and some are less active, I would have to say that is the strength of the Polish or Eastern European teams within these companies. So I think that if these are strong, they're able to get the case to the bosses. And I don't think that when government officials come, we are treated with the same seriousness as when it comes from inside. I understand that, because I mean, the internet was built to provide ultimate freedom of speech, and there's a lot of good that comes from that. But on the other hand, I think that in crisis situations, we should have more cooperation and more understanding that you need quick reactions at a time where the whole world is suddenly transforming quicker than it used to.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. I know you've been so kind with your time in this conversation, but the one question that I've been itching at is something that we here at SIPA focus on very heavily, which is understanding Russian cyber capabilities. Of course, there's been a lot of collaboration between Poland and Ukraine. That's also public-private partnerships with, I'm sure, some of the platforms on, addressing the cyber attacks. I think we've had a very interesting discussion just earlier this week on, are Russian cyber capabilities overhyped, or have we just not seen them actually penetrate our space? And so would love your thoughts on what you're seeing in the cyberspace, how we can continue to work together to address it, and whether or not you actually think that cyber capabilities coming from Russia are actually overhyped.
I wouldn't say they're overhyped, and if I'm mistaken, I would like to make that mistake, and for us, in the future, find out that, we overestimated their capacity. First of all, cyber attacks, which are the most dangerous ones, are ones that you wouldn't see the results immediately. So that's one thing. Second thing, there's a range of attacks that once you do it, then you can only do it once. So maybe these are the weapons which are saved for a later stage. Also, I understand that there are types of cyber weapons that once used, they can infect not only a particular country, but they will go, like the internet does, over borders. And Russia experienced this with NotPetya in 2017. And I think that was a lesson for the Russians, that if you do something like that, you might lose control of what's happening. And right now, I think we're at a place where anything that would go through NATO borders could be considered a hostile act toward NATO members. So I think we should not let our guard down. We have to analyze very thoroughly what's going on in our systems. We have to work together, and this is why I'm very happy that I was able to participate in the Counter Ransomware Initiative, which was hosted by the US government this week. And I think that it's a good thing that we're working together and we're making progress on these important issues. And I think that only cooperation will bring cyber resilience for all the parties that are involved.
Wonderful, thank you. And my last, because I love to do this, complete this sentence.
Okay.
When it comes to tech, Poland is leading the way in.
I try to be modest about what we do.
You have been.
I think we have been leading the way when it comes to investing in our people. We have introduced a scheme which, even from conversations from this week with my counterparts from different countries, is unique because it gives us the possibility to remunerate our cyber staff across all institutions in a way which is competitive versus the market. This is something which is super important because once you lose talent, it leaves the government sector, it's really hard to get it back. So these are the most important assets in cyber. Our talent, our people, and I think we found a way to retain them for the future of Poland.
Wonderful. Thank you, Secretary, so much for joining us. Thank you, all of you, for tuning in. To find out more about SIPA's work on digital and tech, go to cepa.org. Thank you very much.